As you can imagine, shock and trauma from an earthquake could last for weeks, sometimes months. For more on the healing process and the emotional recovery for victims and their families, let's go to Pia MacRae in Beijing. She's the China Program Director of a nonprofit organization called Save the Children. So Pia, what is the biggest challenge for quake relief work, and what is the first step in emotional recovery?
Well, I think the biggest challenge for the relief work is, I mean, you've been hearing from that report just how challenging it is for people to start that initial search and rescue, get that done. It's an ongoing process, as you've heard, but also just meeting the immediate physical needs of people, giving them shelter, giving them food, clean water, making sure that they've got health services, etc. And then when you've managed to meet those immediate physical needs, then I think we look at beginning the journey around the emotional support and the next steps of how we support the victims of this dreadful earthquake.
What about the youngest victims, the children who have lost so much, who have seen so much? Where do you even begin to help those kids?
Yeah, it's really tough. I mean, Save the Children works with children around the world in a variety of humanitarian emergency response. And here in China, we've worked with about 20 emergency response. And we see very similar patterns with children, whether it's from floods or earthquakes. It's really tough to go through a trauma like that. Added to that, if you've lost a family member, if you've lost a friend, if you've lost a sibling, if you've lost your house, there's a lot of uncertainty around you, and we see real challenges in children's behavior. Often they can't sleep, they may not be willing to talk. We see depression, we see anger, we see all sorts of different emotions coming out. And I think what we've learned through many years of working with children in these kind of situations is that there are very simple techniques that our staff can use and work with parents and teachers to help them use to bring children through this kind of trauma. And the earlier you're able to bring these into play, the less likely the children are to see long-term serious consequences of this sort of mental impact, if you like, emotional impact. And so we developed very clear protocols of how we can work with children directly and with their caregivers to support that journey.
And how important is grief counseling in these types of crises?
It's hugely important. We don't tend to use the term grief counselling. We look at a variety of techniques. We have a technique we call psychological first aid, and we really try to provide sort of standard support that all children will need, and then identify children who are going through particular challenges. Some will need grief counselling, children who've lost, as I said, close family members. Others will simply need to bring their lives back to normal. And we do a lot of work around, I mean, surprisingly, what a lot of children need actually very soon is to be allowed to get back and play, because through play, they process this very, very difficult event they've been through. So surprisingly, what a lot of children need is to be allowed to use expressive arts, to be able to quite quickly use other play techniques to bring their life back to normal, but also to allow them to understand and talk about the trauma they've been through in a way that children can do. They don't always express it in the same way that adults do.
All right, thank you so much, Pia MacRae in Beijing.